Okay, hi everyone. Today is June 20th, Wednesday, and we are here with our amazing TAM hero slash guru, Lyle Freed, from the Shores Treatment and Recovery in Port St. Lucie, Florida. Welcome, Lyle.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us. Tonight's topic is loss, dealing with grief of those who may have lost a loved one to addiction, and that can be literal and in every sense of the word, so to speak. Um,
Mhm.
those who have, their loved one was in recovery, they might have lost their child while they were in recovery, or they are just lost in addiction, and the grief that we have to bear as addicts moms in dealing with that with our loved ones. So, Lyle, would you like to open tonight with just some things?
Sure. Well, I mean, you're absolutely right that sometimes the grief is we pre-grieve, and that happens with all forms of loss. When we have a loved one who's at getting on in years, end of life, and there's a grief process that begins sometimes before we've actually lost them, before they moved on. So there's that understanding that is I think important, and then there's like you said, grief of the possibility of loss. We can spend a lot of time in that grief, and what sometimes gets confused between grief and depression of someone that we're just expecting any day to get that call and living on edge for that. So there's a lot of factors involved in that, and there's no right way or wrong way. So that's you picked a really difficult topic. So and because it's so different for everybody, the way they experience it, the way they cope with it, the way they deal with it. So understanding what to do with it is there's no one answer, but there are some things that we can talk about. It can be a very powerful and painful, both physically, emotionally, socially, spiritually, and understanding that it's something that we'll all go through, is part of it. We tend to, particularly with our children, not expect that to have to experience that, but it happens, and if and when it happens, you're not alone, and that's one of the things that is hard for us to grasp when we lose someone close to us. We feel that nobody understands, and quite frankly, everybody's situation is unique, so they may not understand exactly, but that's why grief support groups are so important, because just like any other support group, one of the most powerful things about it is that you're not alone, that there's somebody that you can express this pain and all the different facets of it, and they're there and they understand. That's the beauty of TAM, is that while there's all kinds of opinions running around, that there's some common thread that for the most part we can all get together and say, gosh, this is what I'm dealing with, and there's somebody who will say, oh man, I understand. And instead of judging you and telling you how to behave, most of the time there's understanding, and that's probably the biggest key to healing. So one of the first things I usually recommend people do is find a healthy support group, and understand. And there's been a lot of books and a lot of radio programs and a lot of other things that talk about the stages of grief. And there's two models: the 5 stages, the 7 stages. And there's a lot of debate about even those. And do we go through them in sequence? The answer is no. Everybody experiences it different. But just understanding what it is, so that when you do experience it, you recognize that it is a normal reaction. There's not something wrong with you. This is a very difficult thing to go through, and different cultures deal with it differently too. In the old biblical times, they had a prescribed time of mourning, and people were to mourn for that period of time, and there were prescribed and acceptable ways to mourn. Well, that was in that society so that people would know you were mourning. There were signs of it. The sackcloth and ashes was a sign of mourning, and it was a culturally acceptable way to do things, and it meant that everybody was to understand that you were in that stage, you were dealing with this loss, and it gave them that sort of outward symbolism to know that what's going on. But today, particularly in our culture, we go to the grocery store and we try and act like nothing's wrong. We try and act like it's just another day, and we try to plug away through life, and that's a hard way to live. The loss of a loved one is a significant and often life-changing event, and to just try and pretend like it didn't happen is rarely healthy. So that would be where I would start. And at any point in here, if somebody has a question, just jump in, because I'll just keep talking otherwise. So let's talk about the stages a little bit. Um, the model that uses the 7 stages, and I simply go to that one as opposed to the 5, and they're very similar, just because it gives us a little more to look at. The stage 1 is shock and denial, where just you're in disbelief, you're numb. You may even deny the reality of loss at some level. And that's where I say go on and pretend like everything's normal, and because we don't know what to do. Oftentimes that's our response is to just we're numbed. We don't know how to feel this emotion. It's so overwhelming and so strong that we just shut it down completely. And that's the shock and denial stage. Um, Another one would be the pain and guilt. So when the shock wears off, or the suffering begins, and there's this unbelievable pain, and you start to look back and think of what you could have done, and 2020 thinking is not healthy, in the sense that we've always done the best we could in the situation we had. I don't think anyone thinks to themselves, I'm going to make some really poor decisions today, and it might lead to a painful experience later. So understanding that going over coulda, shoulda, woulda, doesn't really help anybody. You did the best you could with your situation when it was there. And so we can't go backwards. Understanding that we are where we are can help with the pain and guilt. The thing you need to be careful of is a lot of folks will, we already come from families that have a predisposition oftentimes to drug and alcohol abuse. And those can be a great way to numb that pain and that guilt. And so we have to be careful as people that are in the recovery world, or dealing with family members that are in addiction or in recovery, that we don't find ourselves in that same boat. Because quite frankly, I tell my clients all the time that we use drugs and alcohol because they work. I mean, they serve a purpose. Unfortunately, they begin to stop serving that purpose and begin to create more problems than they solve. And so that's a risk factor that we all face when we begin to try and deal with our emotions and even the physical side effects of the grief. The third step in the 7-stage model is anger and bargaining, and that's where the frustration and the pain give way to anger, and you may begin to lash out. We start to blame other people and start trying to find someone to be at fault and someone to be angry at, because anger is quite frankly an easier emotion for most of us than the other ones, than the pain and the guilt. Anger is oftentimes a default emotion, particularly for men. As men, we find, people say, how do you feel? Angry is an easy answer for us. And anger may not even be the real answer, but it's the easy answer for us. And so, we start to, even be mad at God, and why me? How could you let this happen? And I trusted you. And the same thing, you can start to think, well, how come they didn't fix him when I sent him to this place? Or how come he didn't listen to, you can be angry at the one that you love that you lost. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we express that. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't. It's a phase that you will likely go through. And that's not right or wrong. It just is. Stage 4 would be the depression, reflection, and loneliness. And this comes a lot from our society, because again, I do work in Haiti, and when there's a loss in that community, again, they have a culturally acceptable way of grieving that is very public, and people come around and grieve with you, and there's public wailing. There's actual times where we get together and wail together, and that's a physical release of this pain. Here, that's just not considered acceptable. We don't wail in public here. And so we're left to have this on our own. And we tend to think that because we're suffering in silence and in the privacy of our home, and oftentimes because we choose to be left alone, there may be people reaching out and we don't know how to interact with them at this point. So we isolate. And when we do that, that depression and loneliness can step in. And we'll talk more about the depression later, because it's not a typical depression. It's not a major depressive episode, but it can feel a lot like it. So during this time, you start to realize the true magnitude of your loss. And that is part of where that situational depression comes on, as you isolate and you begin to feel alone in this, because honestly, you are. Your experience of it is unique to you. So even though there may be other people who went through something incredibly similar, it's still unique to you. It was your loss, and you may not feel that you can talk to anyone about it. And to be honest with you, most of your friends and family are at a complete loss as to what to do. They're so afraid of saying the wrong thing that they say nothing. And they may even avoid interacting with you because they feel so awkward and inadequate for the situation. So a lot of times people who really just don't know what to do will do nothing and will avoid you because they feel so inadequate and so uncomfortable and so unsure of what will be the right thing to say or do. Do they bring you something to eat and help you with meals because you're dealing with your loss? Do they talk about it with you and say sorry, or does that just bring it back up to the surface and make you feel worse again? And the honest truth is most people have no clue. So then that leaves you feeling even more alone, which simply digs that depression in and leaves you more isolated and allows you to stay isolated. There's very few people in your life that will know how to respond in a moment like that. The fifth one would be the upward turn. That's when you start to adjust to life, learning that you can go on, and actually one of the best ways to honor your loved one is to go on. And that's where, that inner reflection of, what would my loved one want for me at this point? What would they want me to do with my life? Would they want me to stay in my room? Would they want me to move on? Would they want me, if it's a lost spouse, would they want me to find another partner, and knowing that most of the people who love us want us to be happy, whatever that looks like. And so being able to see that as your physical symptoms begin to lift, because the physical portion of this is very real as well. Grief affects us, again, like I said in the beginning, it affects us, emotionally, it affects us spiritually, it affects us physically. There's a lot of different ways in which we experience it. And when the physical symptoms begin to lessen, we can start to breathe, we can get out, we can go to the grocery store, we can go to the social events and talk to people, and maybe even sit with somebody. So that's the beginning of the upward turn. And then the next stage in that model is the reconstruction and working through it. You start to become more functional. Your mind starts to work again. You can think about other things on occasion, and you start to find yourself looking for realistic solutions and how to move on without your loved one. Then beginning to be able to face some of the things that are left from that, such as ongoing financial issues. I mean, again, it affects us in so many ways, and financial is one of those ways, and it's a reality that we have to deal with. The final stage in the 7-stage model is acceptance and hope. And during this last of these stages, that you start to learn to accept and deal with the reality, but that understand that acceptance doesn't mean that it's okay, doesn't mean even that you're okay, and it doesn't mean that you're moving on without them. It just means that you start to see some light at the end of the tunnel, that you realize that you can go on, even if not feeling as whole as you were before, but that you existed before this happened, and you can find a way to exist now. You start to look and actually plan for the future. In the early stages of this, planning for even later today is extremely difficult. And that's one of the difficulties here is we, as the loved one left behind, are asked to plan, funeral arrangements, memorials, and all these things that, quite frankly, is the worst time in the world to ask us to make these decisions and to make these plans. And we're quite often, really need the support of our community. If you're a part of a faith-based community, a diocese, a parish, a church community, a synagogue, whatever it is, reach out to your faith-based community and let them help you. They have people that they're connected with that are experienced in this, and you don't have to face it alone. The other thing I would say again is the support group is extremely important. And I know it's really hard to do in the very beginning. And there are some online resources as well as community resources. One of my favorite, being a pastor, I find a lot of comfort in the biblical perspective. And I think that probably one of the most useful resources that I've ever found for that is griefshare.org. And they have not only an online portal where you can go and find the nearest group for you, it's a grief share groups. They get together with other people who are experiencing something similar and be able to talk through it and work through it, and it's free. And so that's extremely helpful. They also have books and videos They have a daily devotional that they will email directly to your email. That gives you different perspectives on the process, and it gives you a full year's worth, 365. Some of you that follow me on Facebook have seen me do that. I've done it a few different years, and I'm probably started again when I get back to town for my next trip. But I do the 365 devotionals because there's so many people that I work with that need that. And it's one of the most well-received things that I put out there. I just took a break from it for a few months to kind of give myself a rest. So any questions so far before I go on to the next portion of this?
Lyle, yes, I have a question if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Being a TAM, being, a mother of an addict, and all of us, we're a tight knit family, and we lean on each other and we support each other and we're here for each other. And sadly, we see our friends of our loved ones pass away every day from overdoses and addiction. And we always feel for them so much. And we all, I guess how I say this is we're all afraid that ours will be the next. It's really kind of just like a
Mm-hmm.
crapshoot, who's next, is it mine? Is it my best friend's? Is it so-and-so's? And,
Mm-hmm.
and so when we first know that our child is an addiction, um, we're just so chaotic, and we finally get them into treatment and we have hope that they're going to get better. And then
Mm-hmm.
those of us who our children have been in a treatment 9, 10, 11 times, it's almost we just start to lose hope, and we're grieving for our child while they're still alive. It's like
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to psych ourselves up to accept when that call comes.
Mm-hmm.
So in the Nar-Anon meetings, and what's helped me the most. Um, we're always taught to have faith in our higher power and to give it to our higher power, and that's really all we can do because we have no control over any of it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
My question is this: how do we reach out and help those who have lost their faith in a higher power of any type and
Mm-hmm.
are struggling to maintain a normalist lifestyle without having any faith or hope in any type of a higher power? What can we suggest to them?
Right. Well, I think that whether you believe in spiritual matters or not, the principles still apply. So the serenity prayer, that we do what we can and understand that we can't do everything. That's sort of a very, a synopsis of that is that what you can't control, you can't control. So time spent worrying about something in which you can do nothing about is not healthy, is not beneficial. So the trick is for me, I'm very solution focused. When I do therapy with the clients, I'm looking for answers. I mean, we usually know what the problem is. So let's talk about solutions. So what can you do? And then once you've done all you can do, there's nothing else you can do. You've done your part. And you have to trust that you've done all you can do. And if you think there's something else you can do, figure out what that is. And here's the difficulty that, going into Nar-Anon and stuff, that the balance of that is you'll hear one person saying, if I don't do this, they'll die. And the other one saying, if you continue to do everything for them, they'll never do it for themselves and they'll die. And, so there's no perfect answer because every situation is different. But believe if you've done everything that you know to do at that point, and to the best of your knowledge, and you're never going to be perfect. None of us are. Then that's all you can do. And then you're right. Then you just have to guide and wait and hope that they get it right and give them the opportunities and not feed into the things. And that's the tightrope that we walk as parents in particular. Is where is my help still helpful, and when is it actually damaging to them and likely to lead to their demise? So and again, there's no one answer for that. Every situation is different. So you do the best you can. You get the help you need, and whether it be through Nar-Anon, whether it be through a spiritual path or not. Go to a non-spiritual source. Get counseling. Whatever you can do to help yourself be the best you can be makes you better help for your loved one as well. So you're right. There's that, and that's the pre-grieving that I was talking about earlier, and that happens for a lot of reasons. Think about military families. It's not just addict families that deal with that. There's a lot of different scenarios. First responders. law enforcement spouses, and there's all kinds of people that are always wondering, is today going to be the day? And so that's not unusual. But again, I would go back to that. Help me to let go of that which I can't control. Help me to not ruminate on things that I can't change. And if you don't have a higher power to ask for that help from, get a counselor, get somebody that you can talk to guide you through that process, so you know that you're not off base in your thinking, and get somebody that you trust. Talk to other family members, join support groups, whatever you have to do. I still think, again, that those spiritual principles that they teach apply whether you believe in God or not.
That's wonderful, Al. Thank you so much. Very, very helpful. Let's pause a minute and see if anyone else has any questions so far. Is there anyone that would have a question for Lyle?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Lydia. Go ahead. The
Yes.
floor is yours.
Oh, hi. Yes, I want to thank the pastor, Lyle, and everyone, and for this opportunity. Um, and I just wanted to say that this is very needed, as we all know. And I've been wondering, when are we going to have something like this? I'm in Worcester, Massachusetts. I'm a chaplain. I'm an entity working with the Worcester Police Department, with the Worcester Clergy and Police Community Partnership. I have a daughter who's struggling with the horror of heroin addiction, and another daughter who, once she had this daughter is like 38 years old. The other daughter, who's like 36, had a total hip joint replacement a few years ago and got addicted to Percocet, and her doctor helped her to get off of it. And I do want to say that I've come to the point, I'm not sure if it's because, well, I know my prayer life has helped me to deal with everything, but and then seeing so much horror and so much death, that you wonder and you say, well, is it ever going to work? Are they going to ever? Because my other daughter that was on the pills, I believe she's went to heroin. And then there are more complications and more lifestyles come in that you're forced to have to deal with, the boyfriend, the prostitution, the domestic violence, and all that. But I will say, Pastor, too, that I have come to a point where I have felt this peace in my soul. I mean, this has been going on for years, like 10 years, I believe. And I just want to encourage the people there that are with us on this conversation to know that there is hope. I believe as long as we have not given up on our loved ones, that, and when I say loved one, I mean friend, doesn't have to be a family member, whoever it is, that the battle isn't over. I think that once we give up, that's when the battle's over. And I just want to share that, because I know living on edge, and plus when they're in a violent situation, we live in an area in Worcester where the police have to be in McDonald's. I have been on I think it's number 1 overdose area. We're down the street, my husband and I, from there. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity. I came in a little late because I was actually on the wrong webinar. Sorry, I haven't been too well. But thank you for this opportunity, and I pray for everyone to continue to have strength. And we just have to just keep loving our kids, and it's so hard when we really don't know how. We're confronted with so many things. But give up. You're not alone, everybody. Thank you. God bless you all and your loved ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you so much, Lydia.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone else that has a question for Lyle?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead, Kim. Thank you.
Lyle, I am in a situation to where my daughter's an addict, of course. She's constantly taking off, and I mean, that turns me like inside out because I can't find her for 10, 15 days on end. No one's seen her, nothing. I don't go out driving around looking for her anymore, anything like that. she has, I also, there's DCS involved because I have her baby who's 16 months old, and I've had the baby since she was 3 months old. And I am running into the situation. I mean, as you were speaking about mourning that person that's still alive, that you're wondering if today's the day. I'm running into other parts of family hitting me up, calling and saying that DCS has asked me if I would adopt the baby, and I said, of course. I'm not going to let her go out. And I guess in this team meeting, she shared that we were ready to adopt the baby, and it got to other parts of the family. Well, now the family's calling and saying, if you adopt her, if you just don't keep things as they are, we feel something really bad is going to happen to Erica, that she's going to do something really bad to her herself. And it's going to be really, really bad, Kim, like death. How do you work through that? Because it's like another, it's like they're putting you on a guilt trip.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't do anything. I'm just taking care of a baby.
Yeah. Well, and I, without knowing the full situation, I can give you my 2 cents worth, and that's really all it is. And that is that you are planning to care for those children one way or another, because even if your daughter were to return home tonight and say, I want to get this right, she always has an opportunity to be their mother, regardless of whether you have adopted them or not. And that means that when she gets herself to a point that she can be a mother, she will be. And you adopting them or not does not change that. Now, she will, obviously, there's some hoops to jump through, and that can always be changed, and she can be included, but it doesn't preclude her from the process. It gives them a legal standing and a security. So this isn't about ending her opportunities to be their mother. It's about giving additional opportunities to the children. So that's the way I see it, and the way I would ask you to see it, and to share that with other family members, and to tell her, I really, wasn't planning on being a mother again, but I'll do what I got to do because I love them just like I love you. And we're here waiting for you. It's not shutting a door at all. It's just giving these kids the legal protection that they need to have a voice, so that they don't end up, with a stranger. And how anyone can think that would be a better idea is beyond me. So I think just, and people have, and let them have their opinions. And if you're comfortable with the decisions that you're making, then just be comfortable with those decisions, and don't let other people twist it into something it's not.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Kim. Do we have anyone else that has a question right now for Lyle?
Bev, I have a question.
Sure, Paige. The floor is yours.
Thank you, hon. Lyle, first off, thank you so much for doing this tonight. My situation, I don't know if I don't want to say it's different because we're all mothers of addicts, but my son has been in recovery for a little over 1.5 years, and I'm super proud of him, getting back on track. And but I have also personally have a lot of anxiety issues anyway that I struggle with, and I'm working through right now. But I feel like I'm going through all of those stages of grief all the freaking time, because I am just waiting, like you said, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Case in point, yesterday there was some broken glass that I found on my floor, and I was like, where did this come from? And so I called him, and I've learned not to ask yes or no answers, because he can just, that's the end of it. So I ask open-ended questions, and I'm like, so what'd you need when you came over? And he, kind of got ticked off at him. He's like, I wasn't there. I'm like, okay, well, if you weren't, no big deal. I just thought maybe you needed something. Not a bit, no, you have your own apartment. That's fine. And I talked to him earlier today, and he just sounded off. And he sounds off on occasion. That just sends me into a panic. And then I realize we all have bad days. just because he sounds off doesn't mean that he's relapsed and he's using again.
Mhm.
And, you know, God, if that happened, then everyone in the world would be using. But I'm just trying to understand how to process that, because like I said, I feel like I'm going through these stages every day or every few days when I worry. And I am, a Christian, and God is my higher power, and I rely on him so much. But like our sesh from yesterday or today, not 100% given to him, just kind of pulling it back. They're just keeping that hair. And I'm just not sure how to handle that, like I said, that grief of feeling like, oh, I can't use the GOOD word. As soon as I say that, I jinx it. But as soon as he's on the right path, at what point can I say everything's going to be fine?
Well,
I know.
Yeah. Well, in the real world, everything is never fine. So,
Right.
and I don't mean as far as, but for as far as knowing that it's safe and you can exhale and he's not going to relapse. Well, listen, I mean, I would say to look at, he's done well. He's had over a year, and using your faith as an example. In the book of James, it says, "Count it as pure joy, my friends, when you face trials and tribulation, because when you do, it will help you develop perseverance, and through perseverance, you will develop character." So, learning to look back at the successes and the things that you've made it through. So you've made it through this the time before he even got into recovery. You've made it through this last year. You'll make it through tomorrow, knowing that you can look at the experiences and what God has done for you thus far, and trusting that he will do it again moving forward. And then the really hard thing to say and to look at is that no matter what, God makes good of all things. He says, all things work together for the good of those who trust in the Lord and live according to his purposes. And that means even the bad things can have good results and work for the good of those. So he knows better than we do, and trusting him in his ways is so much better than us trying to control the situation. So in the case of your son, trusting the Lord and saying, "Here, I give him to you, and I'm going to be there for him, and you will be there for me, and together we'll all get through this." And I don't even want to say this, but God forbid the very worst case scenario happened. You still have God, and you still know that God's plan, and we don't know the end of the story. And the example that I've used many times is, there was a story of a preacher did for his church, that there's two trains coming around a corner, and they're on the same track. They're about to hit head on. And the only way to prevent this is to have his son go out there and hold the tracks so that one of the trains goes up to a different track. But in the process, he would have to let his son die. What should he do? And of course, the typical Christian answer would be, well, God gave his son to us, so you should give your son to save these other people. But then the problem is we don't see things from God's view. So what if someone who has the cure for cancer is on one of those trains, and you can save, or what if your son had the cure for cancer? Saving him would actually save millions of lives instead of a few hundred. So the answer is we don't know. We don't know what is best. We don't know what his plans are. We just have to trust that his plans are better than ours. He says, "My ways are higher than your ways. You can't understand what I'm doing here." So believing that and trusting in that based on your faith is the real key to you having peace even when things aren't going well. Now, is that easy? No, that's a tall order. That's a very tall order. But it is what your faith calls you to do. So part of it is, again, looking back, I've made it through the last year. I've had questions and concerns, and each time everything has turned out okay. He sounded off last week, and yet we made it to this week. So if he sounds off today, we'll probably make it to next week. Learning to grow from the previous trials and experiences will help you get through the next one.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting all weepy.
Lyle, this is Karen Levine. I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm trying EMDR with a Christian therapist that I go to, and similar to, my son's a heroin addict, and he's overdosed before. One really bad time that was really like a lifeless body, and so that's one of the memories we're processing through. But what I realize is a lot of like my preconceived or what I think about that situation, I guess, do you see any value in that? Do you see any value in, it's almost like, it's like she's having me walk through, okay, what is this false statement that you're believing about this situation with your son? And what's the positive statement that really is the reality, I guess, or something like that. I don't fully understand it. We just started with this. And then tying
well,
it
I
to
will
like
tell
the
you,
scripture.
so yeah, and I'm not sure exactly your question, but if you're asking me, do I see value in EMDR treatment for your situation? My answer would be yes. As far as the questions she's using to walk you through that, I don't know enough of your situation to know the value of those questions. But I tell you what, the EMDR is very effective for people who have experienced trauma. There are a few trauma techniques that we find to be very useful, and certainly EMDR is high on that list. There's debate over how it works, but there's little or no debate as to whether it does or doesn't work. It's definitely proven itself to work. So yes, I absolutely find value in that. It does fit very well in a faith-based environment or not. So it's something that we practice, that I believe in, and that I would recommend to most people who've had trauma.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Lyle. Do we have any more questions right now?
Okay, well, let me go on to some other things, and maybe that'll prompt some other questions. And if anybody has one in the meantime, don't hesitate to interrupt me. I want you to recognize that there are, when we talked about the way it affects us spiritually, physically, emotionally, some people miss out on some of the physical things, appetite changes. And so if you're going through a grieving process, having someone around to help you take care of yourself, because you may completely lose your appetite and just have no desire to, and remember we talked earlier about some of the physical depression. You can also end up with anxiety, and depression usually comes with a dose of anxiety. And so your, heightened blood pressure and chest pressure and breathing becomes labored or difficult. And there's a lot of physical manifestations, and you need to make sure to take care of yourself physically, or it'll be a lot harder to address the emotional and spiritual issues. I believe that we are made in what they teach us in seminary is the tripartite man. So we're, body, mind, and spirit. And they're interlinked. You can't address one and not address the others effectively. So any portion of us that we leave unhealthy affects the other portions of us. So make sure that you do get the nutrition you need. Do your best to get the sleep you need without getting too much sleep, because that's what depression can often lead to. Make sure that you talk to your doctor about how you're feeling. If you're having chest pains or labored breathing or, the high anxiety, make sure you talk to your not only your therapist or your clergy, but also your medical doctor. So because it can affect your ability to get through it. The other thing I would say is that oftentimes when it comes to the grief and depression thing, some people have a hard time telling the difference. Is it a diagnosable depressive episode, or is it just part of the grieving process? So if you look at the diagnostic criteria for depression, there's some significant differences. So you have to have 5 or more of a list of symptoms, which include depressed mood for most of the day, nearly every day, and report feeling sad or empty, and that others see that as well, that you appear sad and empty. It comes by a diminished interest in pleasure and almost anything in all pleasurable activities. And again, these are things that also happen during the grieving process. Significant weight loss when you're not dieting, or weight gain, more than 5% change in body weight, decrease in appetite or increase in appetite nearly every day. Those are also things that happen while grieving. Insomnia or hypersomnia, not able to get out of bed or not able to go to sleep. Again, things that we also experience sometimes during the grieving process. Psychomotor agitation, restlessness, or not feeling like you can move, fatigue, loss of energy, feelings of worthlessness or excessive inappropriate guilt. Again, things that we experience when going through grief. Diminished ability to think or concentrate. Again, when I'm in mourning, my ability to think clearly and respond. I mean, I could be in the same room with a lot of people and not hear a word they're saying, because I'm so just stuck in that mode. So diminished ability to think or concentrate or indecisiveness are also symptoms of grief. Recurring thoughts of death or dying, very normal during grief. Recurrent suicidal ideation without a specific plan. All those things can happen as a part of the grief process, but all of them are indicators for a major depressive disorder as well. So how do we know the difference? Well, typically is that when they do these criteria for you, one of the establishing criteria is that there's not an outside issue. There's not a grief issue at hand. So you have to realize that you will experience what looks like a major depressive disorder. And it is, you are depressed. But the difference with grief is that when you have grief, there's an identifiable loss that's occurred. There's a reason for it. With depression, there's no apparent loss, no present loss. You just don't understand why you're depressed. With grief, your mood variability changes. You go through frustration and then hope, and you have relief, and then regret and sadness, and it bounces around a lot. With depression, it tends to stay completely in the negative. With grief, you do have some response to the love and warmth and reassurance that other people provide to you, so that when your other loved ones come up and console with you, you feel something positive there. Even if it doesn't bring you out of the grief, you feel something positive. That's not likely to happen if you're actually having a major depressive episode. Matter of fact, that's likely to just make things worse in some cases. When we try to console people with major depressive disorders, they often get agitated as opposed to appreciating the consolation. With grief, you typically are openly hostile or angry. You can express it. With depression, they have an inability often to identify even what they're angry at or why they're angry. So those are all things that you can look at, and there's more, some of the differences, but just know that you're going to experience what looks just like it. And so being able to recognize that this is part of your process can also help you get over it. So, and that's why we talked about in the beginning the 7 stages, because we can see this is normal. I'm not supposed to be okay with this, Again, in our culture, we tend to not feel that it's acceptable to moan and wail, to cry, to express our hurt and our anger and everything else that comes with it. And those are actually okay. You have to express those things. And when you're talking about the pre-mourning, where we start the grief process for somebody that we're just anticipating the possibility of losing them, that's still okay. And some people may not understand that if they've never been in those shoes where they're waiting for that phone call, just expecting it every time the phone rings, then they won't understand. But others who have been there will. And those are the people that you can get with and do processing with. And those are the kinds of groups that you can join. And that's, again, the beauty of a thing like TAM, is that we can talk about these things together. Any questions on any of that?
Everything you say, Lyle, is so wonderful. I mean, it's just a plethora of information, and we all need it. Do we have anyone that's called in, or anyone that can only type that has a question for Lyle?
Hello?
Hi,
Hello,
Janice.
Janice.
Hello? Hi. I lost my oldest son. It's almost 11 years to a heroin overdose. I have 3 sons. My youngest son is now 25. He started using a little bit after his older brother passed away.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 8 years that I've been doing this with my youngest son. He was clean. The longest has been recently 18 months. He relapsed, let's say February, March, yeah, about February. It's been a very hard relapse because this is the longest he's been clean.
Mm.
He's dosed twice. Once he was dead, they gave him 4 shots of Narcan. Last week, they found him in his work truck. They gave him 2 shots. I know what it is to lose a child. I know it hurts to breathe for 6 months.
Mm.
I was in shock for 5 years, and I tried to commit suicide because I took care of everybody in my house except me. I just kept running, thinking he was still going to come home. He didn't come home. And I put myself away about 6 weeks, and I learned a lot. I still see a counselor. I still see a psychiatrist. I found my son in his bedroom dead.
Mm.
I was diagnosed post-traumatic. But I don't know how to do this. Am I scared?
Yeah.
I'm damn scared. You know what? I go to meetings. I am one. It's real. It's very real. Yes, we see it on the news, and our friends lose kids. I've lost mine. And I know it hurts like hell. It doesn't stop. It'll never be okay, my one. I have learned to live one day at a time. But it's never okay to bury a child.
No.
But like Lyle said, you learn. I still will drive down the road and I cry. And it's okay to cry. It's always okay to cry. But I don't know how to do this. My mind does not leave my youngest son, Jake. Am I waiting for the phone? Yes, I am waiting for the phone call. And I don't know if I can handle another phone call.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And everybody says, you got to stay out of it. He's got to do it himself. You got to do this. If my son had cancer, I'd be talking to a doctor. So I finally told the counselor, my son was told 6 rehabs ago he needs severe grief counseling with his brothers. They were very, very close. And I finally put my foot down. This is it. I mean, he always signs a paper for me to talk to everybody. He has not even acknowledged his brother's death. It's like he has little steps he wants to his brother. It's like he's a miniature Jeff. And I said, he needs mental health. He's not going to fight this addiction. He's not going to win until he does this part.
Mm-hmm.
And now today he came out of detox. He's in a camp. And if you have to go to detox 5 days. He's choosing Suboxone, which he's failed 4 times. And they got him the shot hooked up for the shot. And I absolutely told them, I know he's 25, but don't I have a right to say, I need to keep my son alive, and I'm going to do whatever I can.
Mm-hmm.
Just if someone listens. No, he's not allowed to live with me. I have made that rule, right? He can't live with me, and that was the hardest thing in the world. I've sat at home in the dark. I've hid my car in case he knocks on the door, because if he knocks on the door, I don't know if I could say no.
Yeah.
I have lost one. If he was down the street, I wouldn't forgive myself. I wouldn't. It's so different. I don't know how to make my mind stop.
Yeah.
And I was with a psychiatrist yesterday, and she said, what I feel, it's normal. I've been there. I've done it. I buried a child. And this is very, very real for me.
Yeah.
And I'm just scared to death. And he's overdosed many times in the past. But within the last 3 months, my God, it's been twice. One time, they're not going to find him. I don't know what. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make it stop. She's not living. I'm not living. I'm existing again. For 18 months, we had a good time. It was good. The longest he's been sober. Yeah. And now I don't know how to make it stop.
Well, let me first just say I'm really sorry about everything that you've already been through, and that you're continuing to have to deal with it with this current situation. So I definitely feel for you there. The part about not having it stop, and you said it well, and I should have said it earlier myself. It's never okay. It's never that we're never completely over the loss of a loved one. We learn to move on. We learn to live, but that doesn't mean that we lose.
I'll be right back.
We lose the memory or the emotions attached to it. They may lessen. They may come in waves. But that doesn't mean that we don't still feel it. So all that said, your question now about what to do and how to make your mind stop. I don't want to interfere with what your therapist is doing, but again, certainly looking at what you can control and doing what you can, and then trusting that you've done all you can do. And that's difficult because again, as we talked earlier about I don't know if you were here because you came in a little late, but the tightrope that we walk between knowing when we're helping or hurting, or is doing too much or not enough. And there's no perfect answer to that. You have to make a decision based on your situation. So if he came to your door, whether you let him in or not, I would say you do what you got to do.
Would I let him in?
Well, I'm saying there's no one that can tell you whether that's the right move or not. That's your decision.
Well, that's another thing. So everybody has the answers. That's another thing. Everybody thinks. I get tired of people telling me what's right, what's wrong, what's this. Before I do anything, I run it by his counselor, and I told the counselor, if I'm enabling him, or if you see I'm doing something to affect him, please call me out on it right away. I mean, they know that.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely told them. Yeah. I do get tired of everybody telling me what they think that I should do. I really do. If everybody had the right answer, all this would be happening.
Right. Right. And I'm sure that they mean well by it, but you're right. Every situation is different. And they can say, look at this, consider that would be a more accurate way to place it for you. And again, the only thing I can tell you, and I probably am not going to be much help to you, just to be honest, is to look at what you can do. Look at the fact that he did get 18 months clean and believe that can happen again. He's in a place now where he's getting some help, and do all you can. And then you have to rest once in a while and take care of you. Like you said, you were taking care of everyone but you. And at some point, it's not selfish. It's helping him to take care of you, because you're not much good to him when your mind is scrambled. You're not much good to him when you're despondent, so make sure that they do take care of you, and whatever that looks like, and I'm sure your therapist can help you with that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, and thank you, Lyle. We've got about 8 minutes left in our session today. Do we have any final questions for Mr. Freed? We want to make sure that we get to anyone and everyone who has a question for him. Okay. Lyle, do you just have any final thoughts that you would like to put out there?
Again, if you have a Christian faith of any denomination, I do recommend griefshare.org as a invaluable resource. The other resource I would say, no matter what your faith is, or even a lack of faith, is that you would look to area resources. Like even a hospice always has grief counseling. So they can connect you with quality grief counselors or groups that you might be a part of. So if you're going through a grieving process, please just don't do it alone. Certainly have your time alone and have your private grief, but know that it's okay to grieve, and that you don't have to do it alone. So know that there are people there that can help you. And if you don't have a church body nearby or a grief share group that you can get to, call the nearest hospice. They have resources that can help you. Call the nearest hospital. They probably have resources to help you. There are people out there. There's options. You don't need to go through it alone.
Thank you so much, Lyle. One last call for questions before we close out our meeting tonight. And Lyle, Barbara Faniola says, I want to thank Lyle for doing all of this. And we do, Lyle. We love you. When you every Ask Lyle, we just love you. We thank you for all you do for the community. We thank you for all you do for TAM and for each and every one of us. We just want to thank you so much for being part of us. You are truly our hero.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Is it okay to say something?
Sure, Lydia, go ahead.
Okay, hi, Janice, and all who have lost a loved one to drug addiction. I'm so sorry. I know my heart bleeds, and I just want to thank you for sharing and express that. But I have lost a lot of loved ones to drugs, and my 4 children's dad too. So I want to share that, and I just want to wish you the best, and just keep searching, and you'll find a way. Thank you, brethren. Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
On behalf of Tam and all of us here, Lyle, we would like to thank you again for all your wisdom and your guidance and just the help and the hope that you give all of us every day. So, Lyle,
Okay.
again, Mr. Freed is the CEO of the Shores Recovery Center in Port St. Lucie, Florida, a wonderful facility. And he's also a pastor and a psychologist. So he is our TAM guru. And thank you again, Lyle. We'll see you next month.
Okay, see you then.
Thank you, everyone,
Thank
for
you.
being here. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Lyle.
Good night. Bye.